Good afternoon and welcome to our final webinar of the application season, our SMART 101 Let's Hit Submit. So to get started, my name is Brittany Bowman and I provide administrative support to the SMART team on our outreach team. I'm happy to introduce the three speakers who will be joining me a little bit later in our presentation today. We have Ms. Dee McCalnan, our SMART events team lead, Mr. Jay Lavoie, a Phase 1 retention scholar from our 2022 cohort, currently pursuing his PhD in Information Sciences at Marymount University. And finally, Mr. Cody Shelton, a Phase 1 recruitment scholar, also from our 2022 cohort, currently pursuing his PhD in Aerospace and Aeronautical Engineering at Auburn University. We'll hear from both of our scholars a little bit later in today's presentation. So before we dive in today, we're going to start with a quick poll. So we have just 1 month left until the application cycle closes. So on your screen, you should have had a poll pop up from Zoom, allowing you to choose where you are in the application process. So we'll give everyone just a quick minute to respond to that poll. And while you guys are responding, just for a little overview of how today's presentation is going to go, we'll start out, kind of do a high-level overview of the program for some of the newer people on the line, and then we'll dive a little bit deeper into some application tips and tricks for everyone. Great. And so it does look like we've got about half of you are about halfway through your application. So that's great to see. We should hopefully have some good tips for you today to kind of push you through to the finish line. We've got about 20% of you just waiting on your references, and right now about 5% of you are ready to hit submit. So hopefully by the end of today, we can kind of get that number a little bit higher. All right. So let's go ahead and get into the program. So the SMART Scholarship for Service program is a combined education and workforce development opportunity for students who are pursuing a degree in STEM. SMART offers two distinct pathways to be part of the program. The traditional SMART Scholarship is for students who are currently enrolled at a college or university or have the ability to produce a college transcript. Any high school students who are dually enrolled would apply under this umbrella, as they'll be able to produce a college transcript. Our second pathway is the Ronald V. Dellums Memorial SMART Scholarship. The Dellums Scholarship is for students who have no previous college credit and intend to pursue a bachelor's degree in STEM. Both of the pathways offer the same great benefits, and we'll get into a few of those benefits now. The SMART program provides full tuition at any regionally accredited university for a bachelor's, master's, or doctoral degree. Our tuition has no cap, and the SMART program will pay those funds directly to the school. SMART also provides scholars with an annual stipend ranging anywhere from $30,000 to $46,000, depending on your degree level pursuit. Additionally, scholars receive an annual $1,000 book allowance and $2,500 health allowance. And if the scholar's award length is over 1 year, summer internships are available to the scholars at their sponsoring facilities. You'll be matched with DoD mentors. And the final great benefit of the SMART program is, instead of worrying about having to apply for jobs come graduation time, scholars can focus on wrapping up their degree and know that they have guaranteed employment as a DoD civilian. Again, this is a scholarship for service program. So what that means is it is a 1-for-1 commitment. So for every year of funding that we provide the scholar agrees to work at their sponsoring facility for that same number of years post-grad. So let's get into some of the eligibility requirements for both of the programs. Again, both programs have the same eligibility requirements, so this would apply to either SMART or the Dellums path. Starting off, you must be a citizen of the United States, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, or the United Kingdom. For this current application cycle, so for those who are applying right now, you must be 18 by January 1st of 2026. You must have a cumulative GPA of 3.0 on a 4.0 scale and maintain that GPA during your entire degree pursuit. You must be planning to pursue a degree in STEM or currently enrolled in a U.S. accredited college for a STEM degree for the fall 2025 term. The program will provide anywhere from 1 to 5 years of funding, so students must have at least 1 full year of their degree pursuit left when applying. SMART scholars work on important projects that advance the DoD's innovative ecosystem. As such, SMART scholars must be able to obtain and maintain a security clearance. These clearances are initiated by your sponsoring facility once you've been awarded the scholarship. As I mentioned previously, if it is a multi-year award, you'll have summer internships that you must participate in. And again, finally, that reminder of that guaranteed employment with the DoD when you graduate on a one-for-one basis. So if we fund 2 years, you're committing to at least 2 years working for the DoD when you graduate. So we've mentioned a few times that you need to be pursuing a degree in STEM to qualify for this program. This is just a list of our 24 STEM disciplines that we recognize. While you might not see your exact major listed here, you'll notice that these are very broad categories, and maybe you'll see that, my major falls under one of these disciplines. For example, if your major is specifically in statistics, you would fall under our mathematics discipline, or if you are majoring in machine learning and artificial intelligence, you would fall under our computer sciences and engineering. If you're unsure at all of where your major may fall, you can always reach out to us to confirm. Take a look at kind of the description of your major on your college's website, and that can kind of help you find a way. And we'll provide our contact information at the end if you're still unsure of where your major may fall. So now we're going to get a little bit deeper into the application and get everyone ready to hit submit. As a reminder, the deadline for submission is 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday, December 6th. So as of today, we've got just 1 month to go till that deadline. So for the application, we'll start by talking a little bit about the personal statement. This is your opportunity to stand out and tell your unique story. Try to highlight what makes you stand out from your peers, what your passions are, and your desired journey. Ensure you're responding to all the provided questions and prompts. Share your chosen field and any educational and professional accomplishments. Share how your chosen field and any educational and professional developments align with your future goals and aspirations. And again, make sure all of this ties back to your desire to be a smart scholar and include how you envision contributing to the DoD's mission. Make sure to keep that personal statement concise, aim for clarity, and avoid any unnecessary or lengthy explanations. And finally, and maybe most importantly, make sure that you're proofreading your personal statement. Seek feedback from your mentors, utilize any university writing centers or trusted teachers and faculty, as well as family and friends who can review and refine your personal statement for you. Another key component of our application is the My Experiences section. For your academic background, this is where you'll upload your unofficial transcripts and submit your GPA. You'll list where you currently are in your educational journey, high school, college, university, all of that information. The resume and employment and clearance section is where you'll speak of yourself professionally. We don't have any preferred format for your resume, but we do suggest that you would consult with your school's Career Service Center to ensure it's polished. You'll also be able to indicate here if you're already a current DoD employee and already hold a clearance. But again, don't stress if you don't have a clearance. If you're accepted into the program, your sponsoring facility will work with you on that process. In the community and volunteer work, teamwork, and leadership section, we're looking for how involved you are in your communities. You can include any organizations you are a part of, any special projects you've worked on, and the dates that you've worked on those experiences. You'll also have the opportunity to list any publications, presentations, awards, and honors you've received. Remember that these are a testament to your experience and show how strong of a dedication you have to your field of study or interest. And finally, if you have previously participated in any DoD programs such as Pathways, AEOP, JSHS, you'll want to make sure that you include those in the previous programs section. All right, so let's talk a little bit about sponsoring facilities and selecting those preferences. So all applicants are required to select 3, but up to 5 sponsoring facility preferences. To assist you with this, we've added a tool that will help you narrow down your choices. While this tool is helpful to narrow down those selections, it's really important that you know and do your own research as an applicant. This recommendation tool will provide you with a list of facilities that match your prompts of degree level you're pursuing and your major. You'll receive responses in order of your most similarly matched facilities to least similarly matched facilities. And once these are put out, you can then filter that down a little bit further if you want to put in a geographic preference or anything like that. And again, I just want to make it clear that this is truly a recommendation tool based on the information provided. It's critical that you take the time, do your research, make sure that these facilities align with your goals and kind of what you want to do with your future. If after you've done all of that research and maybe you still have some more questions on the facilities, you're looking for a little bit more clarification, there's also an optional tool in your application that provides a contact form to reach out to for more information about your facilities. So it's important to note that sponsoring facilities are the ones who are reviewing your application. The sponsoring facilities are selecting you as a SMART Scholar. These are some of the most common asked questions we get every webinar, every application season. So we'll just go over a few of these right now. One of the top questions we get is, how can I tell if a sponsoring facility is looking to select my major? And our recommendation to you is to start on our SMART website. You'll be able to find all of our sponsoring facilities listed there and some historical data on them, including their previous SMART selections broken down by what degree levels they've selected in the past, what majors, what work they're doing, etc. How should I determine which sponsoring facilities to add to my preferences? Again, as I said in the previous slide, and what's most critical, you need to do your research. Be intentional with your selections. Consider what's most important to you. Is that location? Is that the research that they're working on, their mission, etc.? So again, it's critical that you do your research to determine those facilities. Will multiple facilities review my application? Yes. So all of our sponsoring facilities review all of our applications that come in. Even if you don't have them listed in your top 3, they'll still have access to your application to review during the review cycle. And finally, if I'm offered an award and I accept it, can I change my sponsoring facility at that point? So no, again, you're being selected by the sponsoring facility. So once you are selected, the intent is that you're going to work for that facility at that location. There's really no opportunity to kind of change and potentially look for a new facility at that point. Another new feature that we've added to the application is this keyword selection prompt. Here you can select up to 10 keywords that best align with your degree pursuit and interest. And these will help to provide an additional source for matching applicants and facilities. Facilities, when reviewing the applications, will have an opportunity to kind of filter and sort based on these keywords. And if you are selecting any keywords from this, try to kind of pull those back and include those in your personal statements as well. So your application also requires references. And recently, SMART has moved away from letters of recommendation, and we're transitioning to a standardized reference form to allow for a more equitable process by standardizing the evaluation of applicants and saving the reference provider's time. You'll need at least 2 references, but you can add up to 5 that can speak to your technical and personal skills. We highly recommend that you connect with your references before you add them into the application. Once you've confirmed with your references and secured them that they're willing to be a reference on your behalf, you'll input their information into the system, including their name, their email, and your relationship with them. And then you will click the button in the system to send them an invitation to the portal to complete their forms. Once you do that, you'll also receive an email that they have received their invitation. If you've completed your application and you're just waiting on references, you are able to hit submit on your application, but it is still your responsibility to kind of stay on top of your references and make sure that they do get those forms submitted prior to the deadline. So for references, once they go into the application, they'll provide some basic information about themselves and the relationship to you as the applicant. They'll evaluate you then on a scale of 1 to 5 on numerous categories such as academics, professionalism, teamwork, communication and interpersonal skills, and internal motivations. These evaluations will help to align applicants with sponsoring facilities that best suit their strengths. So when you're completing your application, make sure to use the resources that you already have available to you. Schools and universities often have many services that will walk you through your application, including writing centers that have staff that would be willing and able to help you brainstorm ideas for your personal statement, help you to properly structure your resume, and proofread all of your drafts. You'll also want to make sure you're leveraging your faculty, guidance counselors, and teachers to support you. They can offer additional insights into your academic and extracurricular achievements, act as references, and help to tailor your application to align with your goals and strengths. And finally, make sure you're leveraging your existing community and networks. Any mentors you have, coworkers, members of community organizations or professional societies that you're in can also be key resources to reviewing your application. So once you've kind of gotten through all of that, it gets to the most exciting part of your application, being ready to hit submit. But before you submit, you'll want to, again, make sure you review your application in its entirety. Make sure that all of the sections are complete. We have a new checklist feature. So you'll see on your application when you're in your portal, your status, and then a button for checklist to submit. When you click on this checklist to submit, it breaks down all of the portions in each of the 8 tasks that are on the right-hand side of your screen. So you'll see if there's anything missing, what you're waiting on, etc. On the screen here, you'll see the little clock next to references. So again, this person's application, they're still waiting for their references to come in and complete that. So again, make sure you review it in its entirety, everything's complete, and then you are ready to hit that submit button and get going. So once you do hit submit, what's next? What comes next? So once you've hit submit, starting in after December 6th, once the deadline is passed, all of our submitted applications will be reviewed by the program for compliance to ensure that you are eligible, you meet all of the requirements, such as making sure you selected the correct path, SMART versus DELMS, again, confirming majors, that type of thing. If you are applying under the DELMS umbrella, starting in mid-December through mid-April, you'll have an option in your portal to start uploading those acceptance letters as you get those to the universities you're applying to. From January till March, sponsoring facilities will start to review your application. And during this time, we'll host a webinar specifically for applicants to prepare for any potential interviews that might come up. Some applicants might receive requests for an interview from sponsoring facility, but it's important to note that this isn't a requirement for all sponsoring facilities. So some applicants might not have interviews. Award notifications will be sent out in April for the SMART Scholarship Program, and the DELMS notifications will go out in May. If at that point you choose to accept your award, your next steps will involve submitting your official transcripts, scheduling site visits to meet with your facility, and preparing for our orientation program, which will take place in mid-July. So that's kind of an overview of the application. And now we're going to go ahead and turn it over to our scholars to give us some backstory on their journey. And we'll start today with Mr. Jay Lavoie.
All right. Well, thank you, Brittany. I appreciate that. And welcome to everybody who's here for the webinar today. And also congratulations for taking the step and deciding to apply for SMART. A little bit about me. I actually first applied for SMART back in 2017. So I've been in the program for a very long time. I'm a 3-time awardee. One of the first things I'd like to point out to folks who are applying is that my story is kind of interesting. So when I applied during the time frame when they were notifying scholars, I actually got a notification that I did not get the scholarship. So I was a little bummed. But about 2 weeks later, I got another email stating that I had been selected. And that's kind of where my journey started. And I say that to say that, there are people who don't respond sometimes to their award, or they decide not to accept it for whatever reason. So, definitely don't count yourself out if that happens to you. And, if you don't get it on the first go round, definitely apply again. I've had a chance to mentor several people since I've been in the program through their application process, just to kind of help them along the way. But that's just a little bit about how I first got started. My follow-on award that I got for my master's degree was in 2019, and that came about due to the COVID outbreak that we had, the COVID pandemic, and it's kind of sped up my undergraduate timeline to get to graduate. And so my sponsoring facility was open to me pursuing a master's, which had some advantages as far as coming into the sponsoring facility. And ultimately, the work that I did on my master's led into my second follow-on award, which I got in 2021. And so luckily enough for me, I was able to leverage my academic pursuits with the on-the-job experience that I was getting at my sponsoring facility. And so just a little bit about where I'm working right now. So I'm currently at Marine Corps Systems Command. We're an acquisition and logistics command. And I'm working as a lead systems engineer for the terrestrial collection systems program. And I work underneath the program manager, intelligence and cyberspace operations. with the T-Human team, which is terrestrial human intelligence. So a little bit about what I do day to day. Essentially, what we work on, or what I'm tasked with, is helping to develop and provide capabilities for ground sensing and maritime sensing capabilities to the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance Marines throughout their stations, throughout the globe. And so right now, just to give an example, we're currently going through one of our first increments for a fielding decision, actually coming up in December. So kind of an exciting time. We're going to be getting two of our major increments done to get these items fielded and out to the Marines. You may be seeing some of my background and seeing cybersecurity, and you may say, okay, well, he's a lead systems engineer. Where's the tie in there? When I originally applied, the facility that I'm in with right now is actually not on my list of sponsoring facilities. I actually had an interview with an Air Force base out in Ohio, and I didn't want to leave the East Coast. And about 2 weeks later, the facility where I am right now reached out and interviewed me. And, I'd said, you know what? I'd like to take the plunge. I like what their mission is. So I decided to go ahead and say yes, and they selected me. And the gentleman who is over the SMART scholars at that location pushes a lot of the students to go towards engineering because they get a lot more engineering students than they do cybersecurity students. As a matter of fact, I think I was the first one at the command who was a cybersecurity student. They did have some that were comp sci, but none that focused specifically on cybersecurity. So a lot of what I do day to day is not actually what I went to school for, which has been good for me because it presented a new challenge and that kind of allowed me to push myself. But I'm still able to utilize what I'm learning, in school and what I've learned up until this point and what we do in our day-to-day processes. So much like Brittany was talking about, doing your own research for your sponsoring facilities and where you think you may want to go is important. If you don't happen to get selected by one of your facilities, don't look at that as a bad thing. Once you get in the door with that facility and you complete your commitment, you're inside the DoD. So you've got a job, you've got some experience under your belt now, you've got a clearance more than likely. So you could look at pivoting, at some point and say, you know what, the facility where I wanted to go, maybe I can apply for now. And instead of applying as an outside person, I can apply internally now as a DoD civilian, employee. So those are some things just for you to think about in terms of how you may be mapping out, your career. You may get into your sponsoring facility and realize there's a lot more there that's offered that you may not have known about, as an outsider, which is what happened to me. Because underneath where I work right now, we've got several facilities, some in Orlando, some over in California, that focus on different engineering related tasks. Some focus more on cyber tasks, such as a group named Matissa that's out in Camp Pendleton in California. They do a lot of like penetration testing, things like that. So, and that was something that I didn't know about until probably about a year or so after I'd already been in. So you'll be surprised to find out sometimes what all your organization does and can offer. Me personally, I'm looking to kind of leverage what I'm doing now to hopefully get into a director's type of position, hopefully over cybersecurity. The command where I work right now is a little limited on what cyber opportunities they have above ISM. So for anybody who's a cybersecurity major, they may have heard the term ISM. So that's your information security or information system security manager. And that's kind of like your base level cyber person. That's, where I work. And then from there, you go from lead up into a director, essentially. So there's not a lot of steps in between. Whereas other facilities such as, say, NSA or Cyber Command, perhaps, are going to have a lot more opportunities for cyber folks in different areas throughout that discipline. So just something to consider. I also just want to point out, for me, SMART was a perfect fit, just for the fact that there were two goals that I was trying to accomplish, one of which was wanting to obtain, at first, just a degree in cyber. So I originally started out just wanting to get a undergrad, but after speaking with people that I was working with at my sponsoring facility, they kind of challenged me a little bit. And there were also some benefits to coming in with the master's instead of a undergraduate degree. So that pushed me towards that road. And so I was able to accomplish that goal because of my involvement in the SMART program. And then two, I actually wanted to work for the government and wanted to have an impact on cybersecurity efforts within the government. So those two things also aligned with the SMART program and then being allowed, helping me to pursue that goal. And I would say lastly, uh, these gap that we have right now in the cybersecurity industry. I'm sure anybody who studies that, they know that the gap is large, and it's even harder to fill inside the government because they just do not have the talent available. And programs like SMART are helping them to create a pipeline to try to get that talent in. So those kind of things really resonated with me with the program. I've enjoyed it. I've talked to many people about the program, both where I work and outside of that. Even where I work right now, we actually have a Teams chat where we have all of these SMART and another group. It's called NADP. I think it's Naval Acquisition Development Program. They've got us all lumped together. So we actually talk amongst ourselves. We help each other all the time. We're in there usually daily. We're active, as well as welcoming in new scholars that come in, to our particular program. So there's a lot of camaraderie just within the sponsoring facility where I am. So I can speak to it from that standpoint. I can't speak to other ones, but I highly recommend for anybody that asks questions. I know we're going to have a Q&A for you to ask questions. I know they're probably going to also take your questions too, in case you ever want to reach out, which I also highly recommend for people that are new to the process. You'd be surprised. Almost every SMART scholar that I've ever talked to, they're always willing to answer a question or help. So please don't hesitate to reach out to anybody who's involved with the SMART program. It's a great program, and I believe in it 100%. So thank you for allowing me to speak to you all today. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to my fellow scholar, Cody.
Thank you, Jay. Um, yeah, so I'm currently working for the U.S. Army Engineering Research and Development Center. This is the Army Corps of Engineers. It's the research arm of the Corps of Engineers. So I'm a research mechanical engineer, and my lab is the Coastal and Hydraulics Laboratory. So a little bit about my background is I got my bachelor's from Texas A&M in aerospace engineering, and then went to Auburn for graduate school. And at Auburn, I started working on a research project that was through a contract, and I wanted to just focus on research. I wanted to just focus on my dissertation efforts. So I applied to SMART, and I got to the semifinalist round, and then I got rejected. So I applied again the next year, and thankfully I was fortunate to get awarded the scholarship. So I pursued my PhD in aerospace engineering at Auburn University. So I got that in July 2024. And along the way, because I was doing mainly numerical work, I was able to get a master's in applied math, going towards my PhD. So I applied twice to SMART, and currently I'm aspiring to be a senior research scientist for the DoD. When I was in graduate school, my three passions were research, teaching, and mentoring. So I thought, hey, that lines up with being a professor. But through the SMART program, through research, now working here, I realized that I really enjoy this area of applied research where we get to work with cutting edge technology and teams filled with bright minds across our lab and across the nation. Um, yeah, so I think when I was applying, I had a mentor give me advice, and he said success is when who you are aligns with what you do. And that really resonated with me because I defined what I wanted a potential job to do. I wanted to feel like the work I was doing meant something more um, than working for company's goals. So I wanted that bigger feel of my work. So that here is serving our nation. So the work I'm doing now applies to civil works across our nation and even larger than that. So that's one of the reasons I applied. Also, it was guaranteed funding for graduate school, which at the time was I wanted the ability to have more financial freedom. So Smart offered a really good stipend during grad school that was on a level or better than other external fellowships that I could apply to. And also there is international and different research opportunities. So um, you might have heard of SMART. You get to do a internship for multi-year scholars. So I'm a 2-year scholar. So last year I got to do an internship. However, I got to do my internship actually in Belgium at the Von Karman Institute for Fluid Dynamics. So I got to work on uh, CFD. So that's my background is computational fluid dynamics. So I got to work on a tool called OpenFoam and use that to simulate. It was simulating droplet impact onto a pool of liquid, and I got to work with engineers at the Von Karman Institute for Fluid Dynamics on that project. So through the internship, I got to learn a skill, CFD and OpenFilm, and use that now. I use that every day here at ERDIC. So something I want to talk about was I did apply twice, and I did change stuff the second time I applied. So my application was a lot more focused, I would say. I focused more on the numerical CFD aspect. And although my background is aerospace, I now work for U.S. Army, the Corps of Engineers, which you might think is more civil applications, and a lot of it is. But however, one of the reasons I got selected here was because of that numerical application. I get to apply those skills now to a different set of problems. So I think that was one of the biggest changes was in my personal statement, I targeted the DoD modernization efforts. I talked about how my skills I'm working on applied and to the DoD mission. That's something that really helped, I think, push me over the edge and get a interview with ERDIC. So some of my current work, I became a Fed in August 12th. So I get to work on 3 projects right now. So again at ERDIC, you think it would be more civil engineering applications, but one of my projects is working on CFD of a airplane using high performance computing, so HPC, and simulating airplane and ground effects. So I get to actually do aerospace work, and that project is a whole lot of it's a big joy of mine. I really enjoy that. Another project I'm doing is a large scale CFD effort. It's doing more thermal modeling. So if we want to figure out if there's buried objects, if we want to recognize soldiers, recognize different vehicles, it's generating this synthetic imagery to help predict object recognition for larger scale computational virtual environments. So with that, I'm in the weeds with developing numerical methods to simulate very large scale environments. So a very different project in the first CFD than my last project is working with finite element methods, developing methods to simulate flow over complex objects. So again, something that was related to my aerospace background, but now I'm applying it instead of to aircraft, it's being applied to more environmental applications. So 3 different diverse projects I'm already getting to really get my feet wet, and this is only a little less than 3 months here at ERDIC. So I really, really enjoy it here because of those applied math projects and just the amount of teamwork we get to do. Additionally, one of the outcomes of SMART that I really enjoyed was the mentor aspect. So I had a mentor that walked me through during my PhD and also just helped me for these projects and transitioning from grad school life to Fed life, and that's been very helpful. I felt like my skills in terms of the professional and just the more personal skills have increased through that mentorship role. Yeah, so what I'll end with is Some of the outcomes I got from SMART was that SMART community. So at my university at Auburn, we created a group that we got to talk to different SMART scholars from either bachelor's all the way to grad school. So actually, one person from Auburn got to go to the international research or international internship this past summer. So I got to mentor him through the year, and he applied, got it, and got to experience that international community. So through that internship, I got to meet smart scholars from across the nation. So I got to hear their viewpoints, and yeah, just became really good friends with those other scholars. And now at Erdic, I get to do a job that I always dreamed of. I get to work on the aircraft I wanted to do during my um, time as an aerospace engineer, but also became a lot more diversified in terms of my skill set. So it's a job that I come here every day, eager to learn, eager to work, and just have an incredible team around me. So I'm grateful for the SMART program for making that pipeline happen. So yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you both to Jay and Cody. They're going to come back in just a minute and we'll start Q&A then. But before we get to that, I just want to share some contact information with everyone. Again, we'll put this back up again at the end, but definitely take note. If you have any issues with your application, you're looking for a little bit more clarification on eligibility or requirements, trying to find which discipline your major maybe falls into of those 24 STEM disciplines, definitely reach out to us at the Smart Help Desk at smart@smartscholarship.org. If you have questions that are specifically related to sponsoring facilities, maybe you're looking for a little bit more information or just more specific questions, make sure to reach out to our component liaison team. You can contact them at smartcl@smartscholarship.org. And then if you have any technical issues with your application, any account access, needing to reset your password, anything like that, reach out to our IT help desk at it@smartscholarship.org. A couple things to know. I mentioned that this is our final webinar of this application cycle, but we do have two Instagram Q&A live sessions coming up. We've got one next week on November 12th, and then again on November 21st. So any questions we don't get to today, if you think of any new questions between now and then, definitely hop on there. You can send those in. Our team will be answering those. Again, we mentioned that there will be a webinar in January for interviews. If that's something that you're participating in, that information will be sent out closer to the date. And then as a reminder, all of our webinars are recorded. So any of our previous webinars from this application cycle can be found on our DoD Smart Scholarship YouTube channel. And again, today's recording will be posted there in about a week. So by next Wednesday, that recording should be up, and we'll also email it to all of our registered attendees. So before we hop into the Q&A, we're just going to put up one more poll for everybody on, after today's presentation, are you ready to hit submit? So we'll go ahead and launch that. Feel free to respond to that, and then we will jump into Q&A with our scholars. And it is so great to see that all 100% responding to the poll are selecting yes. So we love to see it. Again, we're here to help. So any questions, definitely reach out to us. But without further ado, we will jump into Q&A. All right. So to start off, we've got a ton of questions coming in. Please make sure that you're patient with our Q&A team. They're doing our best to get to them, and we'll address your questions as quickly as we can. So we'll start out with one for the scholars to start. Did you have someone review your application before submitting?
I could take a stab at that. So before I submitted mine, I don't think I had anybody review mine at the time. I kind of just went on feel. And now at the time when I applied for my scholarship, maybe unlike some of the people who may be attending, I wasn't, fresh out of high school. So I know a lot of people that apply to the program, maybe seniors just coming out of high school, possibly freshmen. in college, and they might be in that, 18 to 19, 20-year-old range. I was a little bit older than that. So I had already had work experience. I've been working since I was like 16. So on top of that, I had, worked with a technology company as well. So there were a lot of business things that I already been accustomed to prior to applying for SMART. So I felt a little bit more confident in what I was putting together with my package, which also helped in terms of like getting my references together and things like that. I really had to think about, who I wanted to serve as a reference. And that was before they had made a lot of the changes that they've made now to the application process. But um, I definitely would say that, it's coming in new to the SMART program. It would not hurt to have a second pair of eyes on it. And that's whether it's a mentor that you may already have, in your circle, a professor, a former teacher, anybody that you can think of that might, be in your corner would probably be a good person to have to just, give it a once over. Even reach out to a fellow scholar, like I mentioned earlier. You can find scholars online, on LinkedIn and all over social media. Say, hey, I'm applying for the SMART Scholar. I see that you're, a SMART Scholar yourself. Would you mind looking at, what I'm putting together for SMART? It wouldn't hurt to have somebody take a look at it.
Yeah, so I would say when I applied, so in grad school, my closest connection is my advisor. So my advisor, reviewed it, gave a lot of good tips. I would say I wish I had more people read through it. In terms of the clarity, in terms of targeting the DoD mission, I think um, those themes could probably have been improved if I had more people look over it. So I had my advisor and the writing center review my application.
Awesome. All right. Thank you both. All right. So our next question is, what would you say is the most important part of the application? Is it work experience, honors? What kind of is the one place that they should really focus on?
I'll chime in here real quick, and then I'm curious to hear from an applicant, well, from a scholar's perspective, what you all think as well. But I think that the application as a whole is pretty important. There isn't one specific section that is necessarily ranked higher than the other or that you should focus on more. I think definitely, as we've heard, have people review your personal statement, especially if you want to tailor it to a specific focus area or just for purposes of proofreading. And then also, I wouldn't say this is necessarily the most important because a lot of the facilities are looking for, well-rounded applicants, but the most time consuming would be to just, research the sponsoring facilities. As we've mentioned earlier, we do work with over 120 different sponsoring facilities. And so to really ensure that match between you as an applicant, your interests and your passions with the correct sponsoring facility, we do ask that you spend some time, whether it's utilizing the resources that we have provided on our website within the application, or even just, doing your own research, connecting with folks. I think that is not necessarily the most important, but again, we're looking for well-rounded applicants. I would say that is the most time consuming. So curious to hear from Cody or Jay if you have any thoughts there as well.
I would say now I got to serve as a SMART evaluator. I think it was last year. Now, unless anything's changed as far as what the criteria was, I know that there was a higher point value, if I'm not mistaken, on like the personal essay portion, which I think was like 45 points out of the total points that you could get. So I guess you could say that there was a good weight put on that. Now, that doesn't mean that just because you have the best essay means that maybe you're going to get in. But if you're looking at point value, I felt like that was probably an area where you want to spend some time. But still, whatever accomplishments that you have are going to be is equally as important, whether that's, presentations that you've done, any publications that you may have, particularly that might be of interest to your sponsoring facility. So, and just to use an example, and I'm just throwing this out there, but I like using the NSA. So let's say if you've done any work in cryptography and you've done presentations on cryptography or any publications on anything related to cryptography, but you may not have a very strong, personal essay. Well, that cryptography experience that you have is probably going to be very important to them because it's a lot of what they do. There's a big portion of that they do. So it can a lot of times be contingent upon, perhaps the facility that you're looking at going for and where their interests are. Certain aspects may stick out more so than other areas of the application, and that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think that personal statement, you have the ability to really define like who you are and what is your goal with applying to this SMART program. What's your goal of applying to become a DoD civilian? So I think that's really a way for you can stand out and, you know, build a director application. I think too, if I'm thinking about things that changed between year one, year two, I remember I made an effort to try to get more presentations, publications, different STEM outreach. And I think I even did some other DoD programs. One of them was Naval Horizons. So these different programs are trying to diversify my um, application. So I think it's really that holistic review, and it's also sponsored facility specific. So I think this year I got, or the year I was awarded was because of that numerical CFD targeted project focus in my personal statement.
Awesome. Okay, thank you all. All right, so our next question is, Dima, this is for you. Are we required to submit our transcripts from all of our institutions that we've attended, or should I only submit my transcript from my current institution? I'm going to be applying as a current PhD student, and I don't know if I should include my bachelor's transcript.
That is a great question. So for the application itself, you're only required to submit your most recent transcript. So if that is your PhD transcript that you have available to you, then you can upload that. If you're first year in your PhD program, you don't have transcripts, then you would upload your bachelor's. For any freshmen too, because I think I saw a couple questions in there. If you're currently a freshman, then you'll want to upload your high school transcripts. There will be opportunities once the application closes for you to enter what your fall cumulative GPA is in the system, and we'll follow up with additional guidance there. But as far as the application itself, it's whatever most recent transcript you have available to you.
Perfect, thank you. All right, next is a question we have. Again, this is a little bit more about the personal statement. We've got some people that are saying they're struggling a little bit with the personal statement and how I can contribute to the DoD, including information about how I can contribute to the DoD. So do the scholars have any advice on how to be specific in this section with my goals, especially since it is going to be viewed kind of by all the different facilities?
One of them just comes from research. You're applying to these facilities, so we had to know what these facilities, what they do. Even I think what the specificity, like being specific, really helps. And even in my case, I was being specific towards in my case, the aerospace. So it was a combustion application for Air Force programs. However, because of that discussing numerical methods in that track, ERDIC being more civil, they're the ones that picked it up and interviewed, and I found out that I really like it, like the work here. So I think it's just that, making sure that your goals and what you want to do. For me, it was research and numerical methods, and I targeted to who I want my the end customer to be, and went from there. But I think the biggest thing was just to research in the sponsoring facilities and see what their mission and the mission statements are, and seeing how the work I do aligns with those mission statements.
And I'll piggyback on what Cody was saying. So for me, for my personal statement and writing their personal essay, I don't want to say there's like a one size fits all approach, but I think it's really going to be dependent upon where you may want to see yourself. And of course, if you're starting out, and let's just say you don't have work experience, it might be harder to kind of fathom without having the experience under your belt. If you have the experience under your belt, perhaps, and you have an idea, then it might make it easier. So for me, there were two things that I was able to focus on mine, and one of which I knew for my facility that they had a modernization effort going on where they were trying to move a lot of services into the cloud. So I was doing some of my capstone research in my undergrad for cloud. So I was able to kind of talk about, cloud and cloud security and that importance. And of course, anybody, that's worked with cloud knows that that's still a hot topic because, that so many organizations are utilizing the cloud or trying to figure out how to best utilize it right now. That's probably fallen secondary now to AI. But being able to talk about cloud and security efforts in that standpoint, coupled with my goal of, I wanted to eventually move from the hands-on keyboard type of person to being able to be, a leader or director of cyber teams. So I was able to speak about that, and those two things for me were really going to be applicable to any organization that decided to bring me on, and be my sponsoring facility. So that's just, the approach that I took with mine. Everybody's going to be different. And again, that's one of those things that you can also talk with somebody about, whether it's a smart scholar or somebody that's in your circle, and say, hey, am I writing it this maybe in a way that it's going to be taken the way that I want it to be? And getting that second pair of eyes on that may help to just kind of get some feedback, and add more clarity to your personal essay.
All right, thank you both. All right. Okay, Dima, this one's again for you. So, will high school students with college credit applying to the SMART scholarship who have not yet received an acceptance letter have the opportunity to submit or update their school after submitting their application?
Yes, definitely. So especially for anyone applying under the Dellum scholarship, once the application closes, the program corresponds with those applicants quite a bit to get an idea of the schools they've applied for, and then as well anywhere that they've been accepted for enrollment in the fall. So there will be quite a bit of opportunity to have that constant communication with the program. And I'll just add too that for those applying to the SMART program, if you are applying to start any type of graduate program next fall and you're also undecided as to where you'll be attending university, there will also be opportunities if you're offered an award to let us know at that time.
Another kind of high school question. So, if I was a high schooler at the time I began my application, but I'm now a freshman, should I change my application from Dellums to SMART?
That is a great question. So if you are currently enrolled as a college freshman, you'll definitely want to be applying to the SMART program, but I recommend, just so that we can get more clarity on your specific scenario, if you could email smart@smartscholarship.org, and then that way we can kind of work with you through what your current situation is.
All right. All right, so for the references section on the application, is there a benefit to submitting more references, or is it better to just have the two really strong references? And then also any ways that we can best equip our references for completing that portion?
Great question. So our minimum requirement for you to be able to have a completed application is 2 recommendations. Now, with that said, I mean, it's really up to you if you're in constant communication with your reference providers and you think that the 2 are going to submit on time, that's great. A lot of the times what we'll see is that applicants will put in maybe 3 to 5 references, and maybe some of them submit it on time and maybe some of them don't. So the more references that you have on your application doesn't necessarily mean you're more likely to get the award. It's really just an extra layer of assurance on the applicant side that you at least have those 2 reference providers entered into the system and submitted. It's unfortunate the amount of times we've seen applicants who have their 2 references listed, but unfortunately those reference providers have not submitted the necessary documents or forms by the deadline. So unfortunately they don't move through to the next round. So just keep that in mind. We do give that flexibility again to be able to add multiple reference providers, but it's really to to make sure that someone is able to upload those. I'm curious from Cody and Jay's perspective, did you reach out to your reference providers ahead of time? I also do know that the system was a little bit different when you all applied. It was the letter that we had to upload, and right now we've moved away from that, so it's a standardized form. But just as far as communicating with your reference providers, I mean, who did you select? Did you have conversations prior to putting them in the system? What was that process like for you all?
Sure. So I can hop on that real quick. So at the time when I applied, the mentor that I had, she was always from the school of thought that anytime you've got anybody listed on your resume as a reference, and you're doing anything, that's whether you're applying for a job or in this case, smart, they need to be aware, of what you're doing. You don't ever want anybody to be blindsided by something. And again, not to say that they wouldn't do it, but if you put yourself in their shoes and they're, busy, they have their own schedules. If you just get a random email or a request for something one day, if you know the person really well, yeah, you may do it. But even if you do, you may say, well, they didn't give me a heads up. I'm not going to take out the time to do this or give it the level of effort that I may need to give it. So definitely communicate, with your references about that. And again, I come from the time when they were doing the letters. So I think at the time I had a personal reference who knew me well, who was working with the technology company that I mentioned earlier. I had another personal reference who just happened to know me on a personal level for many years. I also had another reference who worked for another government agency out in Colorado, and he had been a long-time government employee, probably at that time 15, 18 years, I think at the time. So he had been a long-time government employee. And as I went on through the program, when I did my follow-on award, I had a few professors that I had, one from my undergraduate college, one that was at the master's, at Old Dominion where I did my master's, had one there that did it. I actually had somebody write a letter of recommendation who was a mentor of mine at my sponsored facility when I did my internship there during my undergraduate stint. So I was with him. I spent every day with him pretty much for 3 months while I was there for my internship. I went to apply for my master's and I was like, hey, I spent so much time with you. You taught me quite a bit. I'm going to be reapplying. Would you be willing to write a letter? And he did. So, just really think about people that are in your circle. You might be surprised at, who your circle is, and just don't be afraid to reach out to them, tell them what you're doing, express how important it is. And, if they're in your corner, they're going to fill it out, no problem. And the process is a little bit easier now than having to sit down and write a letter, as Dima mentioned.
Yeah, I can piggyback off that too. So my, every smart score is different. So my experience was I was in grad school and it's my second year in graduate school. So I knew my professors there. So it was my advisor and then two people that would be on my PhD committee. So I think a bigger thing that kind of gets missed sometimes is yes, they're your reference, but also if they're a professor, a lot of times they have connections with DoD or they have contracts with them, or so they are a great place for advice as well. So I remember I had a really good conversation with one of my references where he was able to help me articulate some of the items in my personal statement because he had that experience of working with, these professors, they write, contracts and grants to try to get awarded from DoD facilities. So they have that experience. So they know there's certain ways of how you can say things in a personal statement that make them stronger to a DoD facility. So that was very helpful for me. So I think those type of things can be missed sometimes with new applicants, and that's just sitting down and saying, hey, I want to apply to this program. Here's what the skills I think I have, and just have a sit down conversation with a professor or a advisor. So that can be it could be just in your personal network, but also a professor that you did really well or you did a good job in their class. You send them an email, and part of professor's job is that mentoring aspect. So my experience is if you ask and format an email, they will sit down and talk to you, even if you are a undergraduate student with, in their class. So that'd be my biggest advice for these references, is also just talk to them as as a mentor, and ask for advice for your statements as well.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. All right, so our next question. So we have someone who is planning to study abroad this summer, and they're going to be gone from May to late July. So I'll likely be out of the country over the time that site visits and orientation take place. Am I still able to apply and compete for this scholarship?
So definitely still apply. If you already know what your summer schedule is going to look like, especially with those site visits, if you're offered an award, that would be the time that your scholar coordinator will work with you and figure out, what makes the most sense as far as your site visit, your work with your facility as well. As far as orientation, so our in-person orientation is mandatory, but of course, understanding that there are summer plans that are made months in advance. So if you're offered an award, we can definitely continue to have these conversations and figure out what works best with your schedule.
So the next question is, who decides who gets the award? Is it the SMART program or is it the sponsoring facilities?
It is the sponsoring facilities. So I know we went over the timeline a little bit, but just to give a quick recap. So sponsoring facilities will start having access to all completed applications in January. So between January and March is when they are going through all of the applications, and each location is making their final lists and determinations, and then awards will go out in the April timeframe. I also have a question for the scholars while we're kind of on that topic of site visits. What was the site visit experience like for both of you? I know it's been probably a couple years, but if you still remember what that site visit experience was like, and of course things might have changed, but it's always good to hear from smart scholars.
Sure, I can. I'd be happy to hop in. So for mine, which was back in 2019, I was there for, I want to say, 10 weeks. So most of my time was spent with an ISM, so an information system security manager. That's who they sat me with, and that was because of what my degree track was on. Most of what I did from day to day, stemmed into sitting, in a lot of meetings, and what you'll probably hear when you get into government, being fire hosed with acronym soup, day in and day out. But it kind of just got me acclimated to what to expect as far as the battle rhythm each day, what types of tasks they were working on. And in between my sponsoring facility, because they had several of the scholars there were different field trips, I guess if you want to call them that, where we went to the proving grounds up in Maryland, where we got to see some of the tank operators on site there, get inside the tanks, hold some of the munitions, see some of the different mechanical facilities that they had there. Same thing with Quantico. So that's where my facility is based out of, is in Quantico, Virginia. And so we went around to see several of the different areas, such as Grunt Works, where they do a lot of working with like these joint tactical light vehicles, or JTLVs. And we got to see those up close in person, get in, sit in those vehicles, get to see the manufacturing facilities. We got to see an additive manufacturing facility. So it really just depends, I'm thinking, on the facility that you go to and what kind of things they arrange for you to do. But I had a good time throughout my process while I was there. I learned a lot, but more importantly, what I would stress to you is to network during that time, because you don't know where you'll end up when you come back and actually start working for your sponsoring facility. And so fast forward, when I actually started at my sponsoring facility, several of the people had changed positions, some of which actually worked close to the area where I am in leadership positions. So I was able to come in and, I know some of these people who are the, APMEs that work, just underneath the SESs and things like that. One of which actually is the director of IT where I work now. And he wasn't at the time when I met him back in 2019. And I actually just called in a favor about 3 weeks ago on my project that needed to get approved. And I kind of stepped over a bunch of people, and he approved it for me. So just network, while you're there. Don't get too focused on what the task is that they have you on, if they do, because they may not, because you're there for a short time. You're not going to have a government computer, so you're going to be a little limited probably on what you can do, but just make sure to network, meet people, talk to people, get a lay of the land, and they might help shape where you might want to go once you get into your sponsoring facility full time.
That's awesome. And I definitely want to stress on that networking piece. And before I turn it over to Cody, just clarification. I meant site visits as in that 1 to 2 day quick visit before you actually start as. So just for our audience out there, internships versus site visits are a little bit different. So the internship is the actual 8 to 12 week experience that you go through over the summer to gain that hands-on learning experience at the facility to get you ready for that post graduate career that you engage with, which is still great to hear about, Jay. So, and then the site visit is that 1 to 2 day opportunity right as you accept the award, but before you fully start as a SMART applicant to just meet the facility, ask those more detailed questions, and that typically occurs the summer that you accept the award if offered an award. So Cody, if you want to talk about site visits or internships, I'll leave that up to you.
Sure. Yeah, I'll talk about our site visit. So you know, I work at URDIC. URDIC is in Vicksburg, Mississippi, so right on the Mississippi River. So one of my favorite memories of our site visit is all of our SMART scholars. We had probably about 12 to 14 visiting on the same day. We went to a parking garage and we all got to watch the sunset over the Mississippi after dinner. So that was a fun time with all the all these scholars, and most of them, I think most of them accepted, and I've seen a couple of them here, and we've been able to connect because URDIC's very, very large facility. So we have lots of different labs, so people get spread out. But I think some of the things I realized during the site visit is, first of all, SMART scholars, there's a long heritage of SMART scholars. So during one of the introductory meetings, URDIC has a international engineering place in London, and the person that led that was a former SMART scholar. So during our site visit, she got to talk about her experience with SMART and how she got into that role. And that's very common where you see people of people of leadership positions are former SMART scholars. So it's the easiest way to network is you both have that in common, and it's immediately starts a good conversation. So I think ours was, I don't remember how many days, but basically I got to meet a lot of people in this lab. I got to learn about where are the places to live, how, what do people do for fun, ask those, there's the technical questions, but more so it was the personal day-to-day questions, and it was very helpful for me in making my decisions. So I got to meet the team before I actually started working with them. So I had the fun thing about my SMART journey is I had my site visit here, but I didn't actually ever do an internship here at URDIC. So when I started to work here, that was a fun little transition to see where people ended up when I got to start here full time.
Awesome. All right. Let's see. Next up. So our next question is around our resume. So someone's asking if we recommend adhering to the one page for the resume and being in a typical technical format, or focus on a format that emphasizes any volunteer experiences.
I know as far as our requirements we don't have specific formatting requirements when it comes to that resume. I'm curious, Jay, since you mentioned you were an evaluator, if there's any preference there. I mean,
I think that for me, since I've I had work experience both before and then now being in the government, I know that there are federal resumes that are like templates that the people in that arena follow or that are applying to follow. However, in the private sector, There's a little bit more, flexibility allowed in that. I would say, unless there's people here that probably have a V-Day, curriculum V-Day, for instance, that, my resume, if I were to actually break it out, like my current resume right now is probably condensed and it's about 4 pages long, but that's because it's listing out, going back to maybe 2016. I think I kind of cut off everything before that, but there was a lot of different clubs and honor societies that I was in, different scholarships and awards that I've gotten. So, I've tried to condense everything down as much as possible. So I wouldn't say to necessarily break everything out to make it long unnecessarily, but definitely hit on the high points. And you can also look at it from the standpoint of, you know, maybe list out a particular work experience or maybe a volunteer experience that you had, and 2 or 3 highlights that came out of that you think are important if I needed to know quickly. Now that's just my opinion. It doesn't mean that you need to do it that way. If you want to break it out, I don't think that it would impact it negatively to do one or the other. I know these days people like to see things quickly. We're in that information age, so we like to be able to see data points, understand it, and kind of keep moving and make our determination. So if you look at it from that standpoint, what are 2 or 3 things I want somebody to know about this that's important versus this paragraph that I need for them to read through? You could always look at it from that standpoint as well. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, and I would just add too, especially for anyone who's new to resume writing or still early on in their career, definitely utilize resources on campus with the Career Center. Majority of campuses have someone there that will help you write your resume, draft it, even practice interviews. So definitely see what resources you have available to you on campus, to help you through that process as well. And not just for SMART, although I know that everybody on this call is going to be applying to the SMART program, but for anything that you're doing, any position you're looking for, anything like that.
Right. Jay, this next question is for you specifically, kind of being a follow-on scholar. So someone's asking if you had to delay your years of commitment to working, or kind of how did that work? Or did you work between your degrees to fulfill that service commitment?
So if they're talking about delaying my commitment in terms of like the work I'm doing at my sponsor facility, to answer that particular question, yes. Okay. So the way that everything worked out for me was that I ended up applying for SMART during my last semester of my master's degree. And of course, my master's ending in December of 2021, I knew that I would be starting probably sometime in February, which I did. I started February of 2022. So, of course, got notified that I got the following award in March or April of 2022. So essentially, until I graduate, my work that I've done at my sponsored facility does not count towards my commitment. Now, depending on how you feel about that, for me, that just equates to more job security. It means they're not going to start counting that time until after the fact. So no worry, from my end, my viewpoint, doesn't impact what I do. I just completed my dev period at my sponsoring facility in February of this year. And then I should be defending for my dissertation probably this month or the first week of December, and I'll be done. So essentially going into next year, I'll start my commitment phase with my sponsoring facility. So that's, I guess, the only impact is that time working before graduating doesn't count. So even if my, doctorate was going to take me 3 years or 4 years or 5 years, I'd be there that long before that commitment would start to accumulate, time against it.
Okay, so our next question, Dima, can having dual citizenship limit your ability to get a security clearance and therefore the SMART scholarship?
That is a great question. And I highly recommend emailing smart@smartscholarship.org. With so many different facilities processing clearances differently, and it is up to the sponsoring facility to initiate and do the background checks and sponsor the clearance. Definitely send an email in with some more specifics about your dual citizenship, and we can get you a better answer.
All right. So our next question. So we have someone, I'm currently in my last year of my BS and I'm applying to get an MS at a university in California, but all of the facilities I'm interested in are on the East Coast. How am I able to work at a facility while in my master's program in a different state?
So great question. You wouldn't be working full time while you are pursuing your master's if offered an award. So you would be completing your master's degree and then over the summer months going to that facility. Again, all dependent on if you're offered an award, what facility selects you. I think one of the things we've heard, not just today from our scholars, but from previous scholars as well, is that you might be looking at specific facilities, but then you might hear from another facility that's closer to you, that maybe you didn't realize had, same interest or research or whatever it is that you're focusing on that they have at that facility. So definitely think of it that way as well. But in the scenario where you're selected by a facility all the way on the other side of the country, you would go there on the summer months for your internship. We do have internship support payments if you are 50 miles or more away from the facility that has selected you, to help you out over those summer months. But again, while you're in school full time. And then during the summer months, you're at the internship. Stipends you continue to receive throughout the summer months as well. So that internship support payment that I mentioned is in addition to those stipends. And then once you graduate, you would then relocate if that is the situation. But again, it's difficult to say, depending on the facility that selects you.
Right. So our next question. So during the selection process, if multiple facilities are interested in the same candidate, do they both offer them the SMART scholarship, or does one have priority over the other? And kind of how is that determined?
Only one facility will select you if you are offered an award. There is a process that internally will do some reviews and chat with the sponsoring facilities. If there is a situation where one facility is selecting multiple scholars, but a lot of the facilities are looking for, very specific STEM disciplines or degree pursuits. So at the end of the day, your award letter, if offered one, will list one specific sponsoring facility.
Right. And I think we're getting close to the end of our questions. So I do want to kind of give both Jay and Cody just one more chance. If you have any other insights or any last minute advice or motivation for our attendees, before we close out today, I'd just like to turn it over to you guys one last time.
Yeah, I think, thinking where I was, in I guess 2021 when I was applying, it was a lot of thinking back, it's a lot of I'm not sure what's going to happen. I'm not sure. I really want this program to work out, but um, I'm not sure. Now looking back, I got to see that, my network has increased. I've gotten to interact with people across the nation and internationally. I think that is something really special that's been really formative for my career, as well as now I'm working at a job where I come to work, I get to do things that I really love. I get to solve problems that are pertinent to our nation, and I get to work with some really great people. So I think with all that, and plus for me, something that was really particular for Smart was the work-life balance. With being a duty civilian employee, that work-life balance is really, it's very important, and it's something that we are able to have, I feel like here, as opposed to other internships I had where I was working in more private companies. So in terms of the application, I think I saw some questions about grad school. I would definitely, if you're a PhD student, I think something would be definitely talk to your advisor. So that's something that came up for me was just making sure I can complete the program in that number or in the years that I put in the application. Um, and I think other than that, it's just really use your resources well. So you have the writing centers. Make sure you really talk to these people and talk to your recommenders and yeah, just because this is a really great program to be part of. I'm really grateful to be a part of it. And I got to meet some, great people from all over that decide to apply SMART and stick with it. So yeah, thank you. And Jay, I'm sure you have some really great advice as well.
Thanks, Cody. Yeah, Cody hit on some really good points. He's right. Being able to come to work every day. I like the people that I work around, get to work with, the industry people that I get to work with too. I'm kind of a weird one. When I first wanted to get into government, I really wanted to work on cool stuff. I'll just put it that way. It sounds silly, but there's things that we get to touch and work with that, are being used by our military and, hostile environments if you're into that kind of stuff. And so I really wanted to be able to work on something that was going to help protect, the war fighter at the end of the day. And I was lucky enough to get into the PM where I'm working now, that really has a chance to do that type of work. We're procuring real gear, developing real gear that's going to be used out in the field. Some of the stuff that I work on is, similar to some of the things you might see on certain television shows today. From a sensing standpoint, I'll kind of leave it at that. But it's really neat to be able to work on some of this stuff. So that really was something that I knew I probably wouldn't get the chance to do in that capacity, working private sector. Not saying that, there's not exciting things to go on in the private sector, but there are some cutting edge things that the government gets to do because it's just not available, publicly, of course. So that to me was a really neat selling point for the SMART program. And then, like Cody said, being able to grow my network. From an academic standpoint in particular, I did not expect to have that drive for academia in the way that I have. And so, I'm looking into getting into teaching as well. Several of my professors, encouraged me to even pursue a PhD. And that came about because of SMART. That wouldn't have happened if I hadn't been in the program. And to the PhD students that are out there, just to give an example, when I originally submitted my information for my PhD program, I was supposed to graduate in May of this year. And as you can see, it's, November 6th. So I had to get, an extension into the summer, while I was collecting my data, and I had to get another extension into the fall to, finish writing up my last two chapters and defending my dissertation. So those are things that SMART, is aware of, that happens in particular, when you're pursuing a doctorate degree. So don't be discouraged if that happens. Just anticipate it, set your timeline, try to hit it. If you don't, just keep pressing forward to get it done, as quickly and as efficiently as you can. But SMART is willing to work with you. They've been willing to work with me, the entire team. I can't say thank you enough to. They've just been amazing throughout this whole process, and all the other scholars that I've had a chance to meet. And I'm really thankful for all the questions that you guys have thrown in the Q&A, and hopefully I'll get some more questions, maybe even some outreach. I'd be more than happy to talk to people outside of the webinar, but I'm thankful for this opportunity today, and look forward to you all hitting that submit by December 6th. Thank you.
All right. Yeah. Thank you both again to Jay and Cody for joining us today. Really appreciate your insight. And that is everything we have for today's webinar. So we just went ahead and shared our contact information again. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Any questions for Cody or Jay, feel free to send those and we'll work to connect you as well. As a reminder, that deadline 1 month from today, so December 6th. So make sure you're in there working on it, getting those references in, everything like that. And again, check out our website for any additional resources. All of our previous webinar recordings can be found on there. And again, today's webinar was recorded, and within a week, we'll have that posted on our website, and we'll also email it to all of you who attended today, as well as those who registered and weren't able to attend. But otherwise, we wish everyone good luck with your applications. Thank you.